Welcome to Empowering Plans, a show dedicated to identifying waste and undue expense in the health benefits industry, discovering ways to maximize benefits while minimizing costs, and empowering employers, administrators, and consultants to emphasize, once again, the benefit in benefit plan. Today's episode is brought to you by the FIA Group, empowering plans since 1999. Now here are your hosts, the FIA Group's own CEO, Adam Russo, and Senior Vice President and General Counsel, Ron Peck.
Hello, everybody. This is Adam Russo, co-founder and CEO of the FIA Group, and welcome to another edition of Empowering Plans. With me, as always, is my good friend, great colleague. This guy's been here for over 10 years. He still has some hair, but I actually saw a picture of you, Ron, from way back. You've aged a lot working with me. I'm really sorry, buddy.
It's don't blame yourself, Adam. It's this industry. We're all to blame.
I think I'm a little bit to blame.
Okay.
I just want to let all the listeners know that I'm taking full responsibility for the fact that Ron literally looks like he's 75 years old today.
It's definitely Adam's fault.
Well, everyone, all I can say is this. I am glad to be home. I am back in the office to the chagrin of all of our employees. I mean, I guess all you guys are just having fun, drinking beers all day. Now I'm back, and you can just see everyone's just so somber at the office. Ron, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't have any thoughts.
You know, I was on a countrywide tour spreading the message of FIA, spreading the message of empowering plans to all the TPAs, all the brokers, stop-loss carriers, all the HR folks. And there are still places, Ron, in this country where I go to speak, and I ask people in the audience, who has heard of FIA? Who has heard of Ron Peck? Who's heard of me? And not a single person raises their hand.
Well, did you ask them if they'd heard of the FIA Group? Because I get that one sometimes.
You're right. I didn't think about that. So, folks, for those who don't know, I'm a massive Cleveland Indians fanatic, just like Ron is a massive Mets fan. But unlike Ron's team, who has been out of the playoffs since about May, my team was expected to go a long way this year, and we lose in 5 to the dreaded Yankees. I'm starting to come back. I'm starting to become my normal self. But, man, it's been a rough 24 hours. I actually took my Indians flag that's hanging in my backyard and put it at half-mast yesterday, Ron, just so you know.
Tragic.
It is. We want to thank all the followers out there. We've noticed that you've grown tremendously. It's gone from 2 people to 4. That's a 100% increase. But we want those 4 people that listen to us on the podcast to please contact Ron and myself. Send us topics. Send us ideas. Give us your comments, whether you like it or not. What I'm hearing across the country is that people love our podcast almost as much or if not more than our webinars, Ron.
You know, I would tell the people that are listening to let their friends know, but if you're listening to our podcast, you probably don't have any friends. But I'm happy to be your pal.
Right. So, hey, just so everyone knows, please follow the FIA Group, follow Ron, follow myself on LinkedIn. You can get all the information about our company and what we're doing, whether it's volunteer work, whether it's some innovative plan design, whatever it might be. Follow us on LinkedIn, follow the FIA Group, and you'll be super cool. All right, so with that, what do we want to talk about today, Ron? You tell me, buddy.
I would like to talk about everything. It all comes down to this, the plan document.
You know, it's our favorite thing. 8 years ago, Ron and I sat down, I'll never forget it. We rented a hotel room. No, it wasn't a hotel room. It was a conference room at a hotel. Don't be thinking things out there, folks. Ron and I aren't that close of friends. But we had a conference room at a hotel, and we literally sat there and just redlined and said, we need to come up with the best plan document, a best practices plan doc, whatever it might be. And I can tell you right now, if I looked at that plan doc that we created 8 years ago, we'd probably laugh at it, Ron. It's so different compared to what that plan doc is today.
I would agree that it was certainly archaic and old-fashioned and missed a lot of stuff compared to what we've got in our hands today. But compared to some of the plan documents we review time to time, I think our old plan is still pretty top-notch.
I can tell you this, Ron. I know a lot of folks out there want to talk about what's going on with the ACA, all these executive orders that Trump is passing. So Brady Bizzaro will be joining us on our webinar October 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to go over all those details because obviously some of that stuff might affect your SPDs going forward for 2018. But let's put that aside because at the end of the day, all the things we're talking about are going to be relevant regardless of what situation you're in. These are all things that you need to focus on from a cost containment standpoint. But here's the reality, folks. Of all the plan docs that we receive, over 30% of them are literally illegal, meaning they're not compliant with either state and or federal law. That's a major problem. So while we're out there in the industry talking about all the things you need to do in your SPDs, forget putting cost containment aside, a third are still literally not legal, meaning if a member had a denied claim and ever decided to question or put the credibility of the SPD into a court of law, that court is going to side with that member based on just non-compliant language in the SPD.
I think the main issue, Adam, is that with a lot of these benefit plans, they forget that the plan document is two things. One, it's how you communicate to the plan membership. You're basically saying, if you contribute money to the plan, these are the rules that apply. And I think they often forget that. And when you start to change things with the plan, change the way things run, change the rules, if you're not putting it in the plan document, you haven't communicated the terms to the entity that's paying you. And the other thing is, it's how you let the world know, hey, we have a legally compliant plan. Because guess what? If the DOL or HHS or Department of Insurance wants to know how your plan operates, they're not going to sit down with your HR person or your plan administrator or your TPA and say, so what happens in these situations? They take the plan document and they just assume that's how it's run.
I don't even want to get into the whole DOL topic because that's another podcast for in a couple weeks, which we might have to bring up then because we're hearing some rumors that the DOL might be issuing some FAQs pretty soon. But here's the focus. 30% are illegal. 70% of plan documents are one claim from blowing up, meaning a self-funded employee benefit plan has one large claim. The language within the SPD doesn't have the right language within it to actually allow the plan to mitigate expenses, mitigate costs. And it can potentially cause a plan to either blow up, meaning they go to fully insured again in the following year. 2, have huge increases in stop-loss premium. And 3, potentially be lasered by the stop-loss carrier industry. So what we figured today we talk about is what are the best practices? What type of language do you want to focus on? What are the sections of the SPD that you want to focus on? And over the past 2 years, we've gotten tremendous amounts of feedback from the stop-loss industry because, as you know, they're the ones who have to deal with these high-level claims. And based on the feedback we received, we now are very confident that the plan that we've created called the flagship, it's the FIA Group flagship template. These are the provisions that we believe should be inserted into every single plan. Ron, if you put a gun to my head and ask me what the definition should be, what the exclusion should be, how they should be worded, this is it.
I think the flagship, more or less, is pretty much the options that we picked for our own benefit plan and have worked really well. And Adam, you mentioned stop loss and the fact that they were kind of the catalyst that forced us to stop, look at our template, all the different options, and say, okay, if we had to pick for somebody which of these options they would want to put in their plan, these are the best. I think a lot of the decision-making was, one, based on best practices in our experience, but two, on the fact that, and I want to thank all of the members of the stop-loss industry that communicated this to us, the fact that their biggest issue with plan documents is that sometimes it's so ambiguous, they have no idea what the plan is going to do, decision to decision. And sometimes the language is so specific that there's no flexibility to deal with difficult situations. And so as a result, the stop-loss entities told us, we got to find a middle ground where it's detailed enough that we know the way the plan's going to operate, but there's enough flexibility that we can negotiate the occasional situation depending on the facts.
Great point, Ron. And that's a tough thing to do. This is not easy.
No.
Because, you look at all the different entities out there. There are some parties that say we have to have a strict definition. We want to follow it strictly. But in our world, there has to be some room for movement because, as we all know, there's a lot of gray area in the self-funded space.
For sure.
So what are the areas we're going to focus on, especially on our webinar on Tuesday? First, definitions. Second, our exclusions. Third, service and payable amounts. How much should be paid? Discretion. That ties to what Ron was talking about from the stop-loss industry. What is the definition of discretion? We have seriously made changes there. How we define it. You don't want to have it too broad because it allows for TPAs and plans to basically make mistakes and get away with them, but you don't want to have it too tight either. Next, eligibility and enrollment. That is a big issue. We're not going to talk about gaps today, but defining your eligibility is key today in order to have a safe, sound, and cost-effective plan design. And last but not least, the love of our lives, subrogation. What type of cost containment language you need for subrogation, coordination of benefits, and also overpayment recovery opportunities.
I think that plan documents have always been important, Adam, but today it's more important than ever for three reasons. One, I think there's an increased reliance on the relationship between the plan and stop loss, and this is how they communicate with each other through the plan. 2, there's more of an emphasis on educating plan members and trying to get them to have some skin in the game. And the only way you can communicate what the plan is and how they can participate is through the plan document. And 3, there are so many new services and vendors and alternative methods for containing costs that are out there. But the only way you can truly implement those within the plan is if you actually put the language in the plan document. So I think between stop loss, the members, and the vendors, it all comes together in this plan document. And frankly, if your plan document falls short anywhere, you're going to be burnt at some point because the spotlight is on us politically, legally. The plan document, it's how you communicate the way your plan is run. So there's no room for error these days.
So obviously, instead of listening to us, you could just pick up the phone, call us, and we could write that plan doc for you or redline it or assess your plan doc. But if you're old school and you got a pencil or pen out there and you got a piece of paper, write this down. When it comes to definitions, the key areas you want to focus on are how do you define actively at work? We have seen a lot of claim exclusion issues as it relates to that. How do you, or do you even define what's the maximum allowable charge? What's the maximum allowable payable amount on a particular plan? This is pretty new. Most people don't have this type of language, but from a fiduciary standpoint, don't even get me into the idea of our TPAs or plans breaching their fiduciary duty. That is a 3-hour webinar or a 4-hour podcast, but it's essentially you have it. How do you define what a provider is? How do you define what's an essential health benefit or dependent? We all know about the whole same-sex marriage, domestic partnership issue. There's a lot of gray area there. Knowing how you define it is key to whether or not someone's covered. Genetic testing is a big deal right now. Pre-certification, getting authorization, and also what's medically necessary. We are seeing some crazy stuff when it comes to a lot of these things. For example, mental health claims, detox facilities. What's medically necessary? How do you cover it? How do you treat it? How do you maintain it? Are there pre-authorizations? These are all key things that allow the plan to make sure they're spending wisely and spending on things that actually should be covered for their employee population.
From my perspective, Adam, 2 of the things you mentioned, essential health benefits, dependents, that ties right into that legal compliance issue. And it's funny, I think the plan document, instead of being responsive, meaning, hey, in our employee handbook, we told people if they're actively at work, 20 days, they cover for the rest of the year or something. And then let's change the plan document to match that handbook. I think the plan document should really be the foundation, and you adjust everything else to match it. So the plan document's legal, and then adjust everything to match that plan document.
It's so funny because in our industry, so many people build the plan in their claim system first. So if you're a TPA, they actually build the plan build in the system. And then after they plan build in the system, then they create a plan doc. But you're right, it should be the opposite. That plan doc should be the foundation. Everything should be around it. First, have that plan doc, then look at your employee handbook, then look at how you're going to process claims. But that should be the building block. I agree 100%, Ron, and you and I don't agree often. Next, exclusions. There is so much here. Alcohol exclusion. That's one of my favorites. Getting rid of an illegal acts provision. How do you want to work that? It depends by the plan, but it's something you need to look at. Get your highlighter out, folks. Go into your plan and highlight the word alcohol or illegal acts. You probably have something wrong within that provision.
Sure. I remember one of my favorites used to be the illegal use of alcohol. And, I've done a lot of things with alcohol, Adam, but I'm not sure any of it's ever been illegal, I think. But it's kind of interesting when you look at the language, you understand what the intent was behind it. But the person that you're providing this plan document to, the member that you're communicating it to, they're going to read it. If it's not clear, then chances are they're going to read against you unless you have discretionary authority, which then again, you better make sure you're providing that in the plan document as well.
Ron, I'm a little disappointed in you. Yesterday at FIA, we had a big thing for our employees. We had a wine tasting event and a craft beer tasting event at a local shop right down the street from us. And I thought when I'd walk in there that Ron's going to be sipping all these different craft brews from all over the world. And I'm like, wow, Ron's not here. This place was amazing. So if there's any chance that you could have an illegal use of alcohol, Ron, I would suggest that you go to the next wine tasting.
I actually missed it specifically because our plan document has such an excellent, well-written alcohol exclusion. I was worried about having some out-of-pockets, Adam.
Speaking of, occupational exclusion.
Hey, there you go.
That is the key. You got to look at what that occupational exclusion says as well. In addition, provider error. Folks, providers make mistakes. They're human. Just like Ron, once in a while you make a mistake. I've made one, I think, in 2016. At the end of the day, There are reasonable errors and unreasonable errors. The number of inquiries we get on this, when you go to the plan doc, the reality is we have no idea if that language covers it or not. We're making an educated guess at best. It's like the SATs, get it down to those 2 answers and then just flip a coin. That's basically what we've done here as well.
Yeah, Adam, I have to disagree with you. I don't think that providers make mistakes. That's why they're called never events, because they never happen.
Same thing when it comes to excess. What is excess in regards to an exclusion? A lot of gray area. Folks, if you look at certain MGUs, certain stop-loss policies, they basically allow you to deny for excess charges. What are they comparing that to? How is it excess? I have no idea. Hazardous pursuit, hazardous hobbies, activities, all those things. My favorite is this, if I'm riding a unicycle in a mountain range, is that a hazardous activity?
Well, not if you're part of the benefit plan that covers the Unicycle Riders Association of America.
Or if you're the benefit plan that creates and makes unicycles.
Unicycles Inc.
Right. So again, these are the type of things that you have to look at: your geography, the demographics of your employee population. What does your company actually do? If your company makes race cars, I'm assuming it's not hazardous to drive in a race or to have go-kart racing. I don't know, but it comes down to the plan. Also, riding a horse in the South Shore of Boston on 3A might be a hazardous activity, but maybe in Montana, it's the way you get to work.
They have a bicycle lane for horses there, Adam, but I would argue riding or driving any vehicle, animal, or otherwise traveling in Boston is a hazardous activity.
So when we talk about this mountain unicycling, you have to look at the definition of discretion. It's probably not going to be listed. Your exclusions can't list every possible hazardous activity because you'd have a 3,000-page SPD. That's where the plan discretion comes in. It has to be reasonable discretion. So there are certain things that are hazardous that are reasonable to deny, others that are not reasonable to deny. So, for example, if I decide to go jogging and someone goes, well, that's a hazardous activity, we don't want people to jog. We believe everyone should walk. And we're going to deny a claim because you fell and broke your ankle because you were jogging on the street. That might be decided to be unreasonable, but it all comes down to the discretion of the particular plan administrator, plan sponsor.
Right, unless, of course, you're excluding jogging with scissors in your hand because everyone knows that's hazardous. But the one thing I'll mention also with that is if you do decide to start listing things, often you'll see including but not limited to, just remember that list is not, it doesn't define the entire group, but it does set the tone. So if you're starting to reference the same types of activities that are generally considered to be hazardous, because they're risk-seeking, like parachuting, jumping out of a plane, bungee jumping, free diving, things like that, then assume that even though the list is not exhaustive, other activities that are like those things will be deemed to be hazardous because of the nature of the list.
Ron, it was great back and forth today. I really appreciate it. Folks, there is so much more that we can go over, but these are the main areas that we want you to focus on when you're looking at your plan document and how it should be defined. But we hope that you join us on October 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, where we really get in the weeds when it comes to these things. And we're probably going to do that over the next few months as more and more of you and more of your plans are restating or amending your plan docs for 2018. Ron?
And if you are listening to this podcast after that date, October 17th, please note, immediately following the webinar, we do post the recording and slides on our website in the media section. So if you're first listening to this podcast and we've already done the webinar, by all means, go and download it. You haven't been left out.
So on behalf of Ron and myself, thank you so much for dialing in. Thanks so much for listening. And we hope you continue to empower your plans.
Thank you.